Welcome to the Power of Your Mind podcast. I'm Victoria Gallagher, your host. Have you been attempting to use law of attraction or hypnosis to attract financial abundance, a soulmate, or career success? Would you like to be happy, motivated, and successful? Have better health, enjoy more fulfilling relationships, overcome struggle, and gain mastery over your life? Then join me on this amazing self-help podcast where you'll unleash the power of your mind. I'll be sharing 20 years of wisdom and techniques of hypnotherapy, law of attraction, visualization, meditation, personal growth, positive affirmations, and other effective methods to help you tap into the great power which resides in your mind and become the best version of yourself. Well, hello and welcome to today's episode of the Power of Your Mind podcast. You're listening to episode number 85. I'm Victoria Gallagher, Law of Attraction coach and #1 best-selling author of Practical Law of Attraction, Align Yourself with the Manifesting Conditions and Successfully Attract Your Desires. I'm also a clinical hypnotherapist, founder of HipTalk.com and HypnoCloud apps. So be sure to stop by HipTalk.com, sign up for your free self-hypnosis video training course. And for our listeners who found us through the Power of Your Mind podcast, you can get 35% off your first order of hypnosis downloads when you apply the code podcast to your shopping cart. Also, be sure to download our latest HypnoCloud app from the iTunes store. So today, I have a very special guest with me, David Wood. David Wood is a former consulting actuary to Fortune 100 companies, including Sony Music, Chanel, and Exxon. David left his cushy Park Avenue job 20 years ago to build the world's largest coaching business. He became #1 on Google for life coaching, serving an audience of 150,000 coaches and providing coaching to over thousands of hours in 12 countries around the globe. Alongside his clients' successes, David is no stranger to overcoming challenges himself, having survived a full collapse of his paraglider and a fractured spine, witnessing the death of his sister at age 7, anxiety and depression, and a national Gong Show. He is the author of Get Paid for Who You Are with foreword by Jack Canfield. He was nominated to the Transformational Leadership Council alongside such thought leaders such as Don Miguel Ruiz, John Gray, and presidential candidate Marianne Williamson. David believes that tough conversations we avoid are our doorway to confidence, success, and love. They become the defining moments which shape our careers, our relationships, and our lives. He coaches high-performing entrepreneurs, executives, and teams, and now prison inmates to create amazing results and deep connections, one tough conversation at a time. So today, David is going to share some of his insights about harnessing the power of your mind by having those tough conversations. And you can take a 5-minute life assessment at playforreal.life. That's playforreal.life. So welcome to the show, David.
Thank you, Victoria. And you've already enrolled me. I've just downloaded your HypnoCloud app.
Oh, that's cool. Very good.
On my phone, it seems like a good idea to me. It says access to 500 hypnosis sessions. I want some of that.
Yes, definitely. Oh, thank you so much. And that's let that be a clue to our listeners out there to go ahead and do the same. Our Android one's coming out in February. So very
Excellent.
cool. Well, thank you so much for doing that. And thank you for being a guest on the Power of Your Mind podcast. I think this is a really interesting topic that we talk about here, having tough conversations. I mean, I think so many times people just avoid having these conversations altogether. People want to, they want to stay calm and just, I don't know what it is that makes people avoid it. I mean, maybe they're just afraid that they're going to.
Yeah. Well, let me put some context around that. Yeah. I love helping people with tough conversations because I think it's our doorway to deeper connection with people, to more fuller self-expression and confidence and self-love, and also great results.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a microcosm of what I'm into. What I want is people to live a regret-free life. I want them to play for real, which means don't take life too seriously, recognize that it's a game, but let's play it like it really matters and live life fully so that on your deathbed, you can look back and say, I have no regrets. I gave it absolutely everything. And when I looked at, well, how do we do that? I realized, all right, I want people to have more truth, more daring, and more caring, and tough conversations are the easiest access to that. Lean into those things that you're scared of, and it's worth it. And you said, you raised the question, why do we run from it? Well, one reason is we might be thinking we want to preserve the relationship. So I'm not going to say that to my mother. I'm not going to say that to my client. I'm not going to say that to my coworker or my boss because I want to keep the peace, right? But unfortunately, in trying to preserve the relationship, you can actually destroy the relationship.
I totally agree. And I believe that without having these tough conversations, it's a doorway to intimacy. And when I say intimacy, I don't mean, how some people think of the word intimacy, but intimacy meaning, just knowing a person, knowing the truth, knowing their truth, and knowing their reality. And I totally agree with what you stand for here so much because, I believe like if we're trying to preserve that relationship, well, we're preserving an artificial version of the relationship.
Yeah. And it might seem counterintuitive. Like the mind says, let's not do that. It's going to make waves. I'm going to feel awkward. They're going to feel awkward. They might get defensive. They might not even listen to me. They might start attacking me. So it's normal that people would want to avoid it. But humans have developed this ability to override our natural instinct. For example, going to the gym. It doesn't feel good for everybody. Some people, running a marathon or something, it can feel really difficult. Rehabilitation. When you're like, you've got a bad knee and you've got to do those exercises and it's painful, you don't want to do it. But you override your instinct because there's profit down the line. When you're thrown into a pool, if you just follow instinct, you'll dog paddle. That's human instinct. We need to override that instinct so that we can swim and go further easier. Yeah. Same with tough conversations. If we just go with our instinct, we're going to stay small. We're going to possibly end up destroying the relationship because resentment will build up. We're not going to get the results that we really want in life. So we need to be willing to make friends with discomfort and exercise that discomfort muscle. Have you ever done a cold shower?
I have done a cold shower. I'm not in the cold shower culture, but I know that there's...
You're not in the cold shower club? Yeah. Well, neither am I. I'm a bit of a wuss in many things. I'm a warrior in other things, but I'm scared. And particularly I live in Colorado right now, so a cold shower is damn cold.
Yeah.
But I did get myself in Boulder Creek as between summer and winter, it was freezing cold and it was painful. But I started with just my ankles and did a minute and got out. And I built up over a week until I could submerge right up to my neck in the creek. Wow. And it got easier and easier. We can develop that capacity. Same with tough conversations. we can develop that capacity to feel uncomfortable because our mind can tell us there's an upside.
So you're saying don't dive right into the toughest conversation you're ever going to have. Take little baby steps, and something that might be a little uncomfortable, just beyond your normal level of what's comfortable. You want to maybe start there.
Yeah, absolutely. This brings up another really important point. I see 3 different zones. We've got the stagnation zone, where we're just going through our patterns. We're trying to keep the peace. We're a little bit bored. It's no fun to be in that zone. Then on the far side, you've got the trauma zone, where you go too far. You might be doing ice baths every day. You go and do ayahuasca or kambo, which is like a frog sweat from the jungle, I've just done both recently, and they're horrendous for me. I'm a paragliding pilot, so I've jumped off a mountain and gone up to 10,000 feet. I found it's possible to go too far.
Yeah.
And you go into trauma, and that's not good for the body either. But in the middle, between the stagnation zone and the trauma zone, is a sweet spot where it might be a bit uncomfortable, but there's growth.
Yeah.
So
I equate that to either, like running. I mean, you're not going to go out and take on a marathon or even a 5K when you first start running. Right. You're going to do, maybe 5 minutes or a minute, and,
yes.
I started doing a little trail running today. I'm doing a 30-day 6-mile hike, and it has quite an incline, and it's pretty treacherous and rocky. But I decided, eventually I want to run this thing. And I see a lot of people out there running, and I see myself doing that. But it's like 1 minute on, 2 minutes off. 1 minute on, 2 minutes off.
Yeah. So with tough conversations, let's, to
equate that.
Use that. Some of the biggest conversations, let's talk about what some of these tough conversations are. At the big end, there's stuff like you're fired, or I'm breaking up with you, or I cheated on you, or I did something illegal. I committed a crime, and I want to make it right and pay the price. Like, these are some of the really big, scary conversations, and I've had a lot of those. But don't start there. You can start with the smaller ones, and you'd be surprised how these small conversations can still be scary. For example, I offered someone a coaching session as a gift. I said, I'm going to help you for half an hour. He didn't show up. Mm-hmm. Now, all right, I'm going to be pretty disappointed generally when that happens. But he wrote and said, look, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I've adjusted the session to next week. And that triggered me. I was like, wait a minute, you've adjusted this? This is not an adjusted session. This is a no-show. It had an impact on me, and I didn't know this initially. I just felt bad, and I didn't want to do the session. So there's your clue, right? I felt bad, and I didn't feel closer to this guy. I felt further away from him. And then I looked at, well, what's going on? And it took me half an hour to realize I felt like my time wasn't being respected. Not that he wasn't respecting it, but that's how I felt. And I realized for me to have the session with him, I'd want to know that he realized the impact of not showing up, and I'd like him to ask for my agreement to reschedule it instead of just assuming I'm going to do it again.
Absolutely.
And I'd like to hear that he does respect and value my time, just so that I can feel better. And that's an example of something that I think often we might gloss over, because my mind is telling me, don't do it. He's going to get defensive. He might badmouth you in the industry. He's going to call you oversensitive. This is what I was going through. And I decided, no, there's profit. And I don't mean financial profit, but the gain for me speaking with him is potentially higher than the risk. So I reached out, I told him how I felt, and he reacted amazingly. He said, I'm so impressed that you would bring that up. He said, can I share this in my podcast about what happened? And now he's going to be on my podcast, and we're going to talk about this as an example. So It might be just something your partner does that bugs you, or something you want more of from your kid, or something that a store does or a restaurant does. And you're not speaking up because you don't want to make waves. That's where you can practice.
Well, and you know what I heard in your conversation is number one, you didn't just react. You got in touch with what the impact was and why you felt the way that you did. You didn't say, "Hey, I didn't like it that you didn't show up for my podcast, for my appointment. You don't respect my time." You got in touch with what the feeling was. But not only that, and I think that this is where the problem lies with a lot of these conversations, is you asked for what you wanted instead. And I think that is so key to these conversations, is knowing, what do I want? Because so easy to go into, well, I don't like that, but what do you want instead? And put that out there, because that gives them some place to go and some way to make it right.
Yeah. And I love what you said about that reaction. They say the difference between a reaction and a response is 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And we're humans. We think we're so much better than the animals, but we're really creatures of habit, and we're so reactionary. So this guy said he adjusted the session, and I'm triggered, right? And I figure I'm pretty enlightened. I've done 20 years of training in communication, but I'm triggered. Someone else wrote to me. I tried to do them a favor, and she wrote to me and said, "Here are 3 things wrong with how you did that. I'm not liking this. I'm having a reaction." I wasn't all enlightened. I didn't say, "All right, David, just sit for 30 minutes and just see what's going on here." I wanted to write back immediately and say, "All right, do it yourself next time." That was my reaction. It took 5 minutes. And, the so-called expert took me 5 minutes to realize, wow, I don't have any interest in her world or her experience at all. I just want to defend. So I had to slow it down. I took another hour to work out what was going on. Sometimes I'll get some coaching, because it's like, I'm upset with this. And then once I know what's happening for myself, I've got much more access to communicating powerfully. And we can give listeners, if you like, I have a giveaway, which is a 4-step blueprint for going through a tough conversation. And it comes with a worksheet. So you don't have to work all this out on your own. The worksheet will ask you questions, and you go, "Oh, this is why I'm upset. This is my hope. This is my fear, and this is my request." You can get it all down ahead of time. It's going to go way better for you.
If you find value in this personal growth related material, I strongly recommend that you sign up for your $1 trial to my Personal Growth Club. Just head on over to personalgrowthclub.com and get a whole month of premium Personal Growth Club video training materials, meditations. You also get 6 free hypnosis sessions that are valued at over $174, all for this trial of just $1. Even if you cancel, you can keep the 6 hypnosis sessions. That's my gift to you, and that's how confident I am that you are going to love Personal Growth Club. Go to personalgrowthclub.com and start your $1 1-month trial today. I love that. I love having a formula for a tough conversation. I mean, my husband and I, we have our breakdowns, and we have our tough conversations, and, the best results have always happened when we've used some sort of a communication strategy or formula. And I think it's really, and I like the sounds of the strategy that you've given. It sounds like it's 4 steps. And can you repeat those again?
Well, I didn't say the 4 steps. Let me take you quickly through the worksheet and then the 4 steps. It's quite simple. But basically, and this isn't on the sheet, but it should be, the first thing really is do nothing. Like when it happens, do not react. You need to take time to calm down. Maybe sleep on it. breathe, and sometimes I'll run it past someone else. It releases a lot of charge. Otherwise, they're going to get all my charge when I bring it to the conversation, and they're going to react to the charge, not the content of what I'm saying.
It's so true. It is so true. There's been so many times we've had conversations where, it's not even the content that's being said. It's how you say it.
It's the emotion and the how. Yep, exactly. So if I'm angry with you right now, you're going to be picking up on like, hey, this isn't safe. And you're just going to be getting that I'm angry. Even if I'm saying nice things like, all right, I want to work with you on this, whatever. But if I'm angry, you're going to get that. It's better if I can at least name it. I realize I'm angry right now and I want to resolve this with you. Now it's like, all right, at least you're naming the elephant in the room. Let me take you through the worksheet. The first thing is, who is it? Who's the issue with? What's your hope? What do you see? The mind will present all the fears and concerns, but the mind won't usually tell you, wait a minute, you could get really connected with this person, or you could make a difference for everybody in your community by standing up for this. So what's your hope? What's your fear or concern? There's something that could go wrong, which is why it's a tough conversation. So they're going to call me oversensitive, or I'm going to get fired, or my partner's going to break up with me. There's my fear or concern. Am I willing to accept that? Because if I'm not, I'm not going to have that conversation. But I try and get myself to a place where I can let go and say, all right, if that's what happens, I trust that that's what's right. Then on the worksheet, it will ask you, what's the issue? So you can write it down, get it clear for yourself. And then what's your request? This is big. In fact, I got coached recently. I do a free weekly Zoom call where anyone can come in and role play their tough conversations with a coach. And I was the guinea pig. I had a coach me when I was upset with my aunt about something. And then they said, what's your request? I was like, wow. I mean, she can't go back in time and change what she did. I really had to look for, is there something she could do? Right. And finally I came up with, I think I'd like her to really understand how hurt I felt, just to get my world. And I didn't know that.
Isn't that, the heart of so many of these conversations is that need to feel understood and for them to at least understand and see it through your eyes and empathize with the impact that it had on you.
Yes, there are probably multiple levels, but I'm seeing two right now. One is we've got on the surface, we've got a request, we've got a result. Like we want them to stop throwing their socks on the floor, or we want the customer to sign up with the company. We've got usually a request, like some kind of external result. But I say, even if you don't get that, there's a great chance you're going to feel better about yourself and more connected with the other person. It's like, hey, yeah, I get how you could want that, and I wish I could say yes to that. It's just, I'm a no. Okay, well, I'm glad I spoke up. I'm glad I said it, so I'm not guessing. I'm glad I asked you out. I'm glad I asked you to dinner. And, maybe she appreciates that I asked and she said no. I'm like, all right, and I'm more expressed and deeply connected, and she gets my world. I think you're amazing. I'd love to go out with you. If you change your mind, we'll have a great time. It's not about the result. The result is a bonus. So the last step on the worksheet is, what if you put yourself in the other person's shoes? How might they be seeing this? So obvious. Yeah. It seems obvious now to me. But when I'm triggered, I'm not putting myself in their shoes. I'm like, how dare you?
It's probably one of the most, especially when you're triggered, it's probably one of the most difficult things to do is to change that perspective and look at you from the other person's point of view, because we want to feel like our point of view is right. And it's, and if we look at ourselves from another point of view, we're going to have to, if we're being true and we're being honest about how that person might see it, we have to resign to being right about it.
Yeah, I just interviewed somebody for my new podcast, which is Tough Conversations, and he mentioned two critical missing ingredients in tough conversations. The first one is the willingness to own your own perceptions or to own your own world. We go around thinking this is reality.
Yeah.
You left the house a mess. Right? That's a universal statement. That's not owning my perceptions and experience. If I'm going to own my experience, it'll be like, the house seemed like a mess to me, and I felt upset when I got home. So that's the first missing ingredient.
Very responsible, mature way of doing it. It's a very elevated way of having that conversation. And most people are not able to discuss it like that. It's like, just like you said, the house is a mess. It is. Yeah. Anybody else would come in here and they would absolutely agree with me.
Now you go off on a tangent. Now you're going to get distracted because now you're arguing about a universal truth. Because in their world, in fact, this was the example that he and I used. He's a friend of mine, and I stayed at his house, and he was upset because he got home and felt the house was a mess. Now, if he says to me the house was a mess, I've got a different viewpoint. For me, I went and cleaned up a whole bunch of stuff, and the house seemed pretty much in the same condition as when I got. So now we're in an argument about a universal statement. Whereas if he owns his experience, owns his own world, and says the house seemed to be a mess to me and I felt upset, I can't argue with that. That's his world, and now there's a chance I might be able to just get his experience, and then maybe he can get my experience, and we can get each other's worlds. I didn't even know about this concept until a year ago of getting each other's worlds. I didn't know we had worlds. I just figured there's reality, and some of us know it and some of us don't. But no, we've got our own perception. And then the second missing ingredient is willingness to get someone else's world.
Yeah.
Like with that friend that criticized how I helped her, I was just wanting to defend, and it took 5 minutes to go, this is a great chance for me to get her world. What's it like to be in her shoes? So I tried to imagine being her, and I could see everything from her point of view then. I didn't agree with everything, but I'm like, I could see how she could come up with that. And it gave me access to responding in a much better way. And I could say, okay, so what I'm hearing is this, and this. And by the way, this one I apologize for. That was totally wrong. And I'd like to talk about the rest whenever you're ready. Two missing ingredients. It's interesting, isn't it?
Definitely. So how does a person...
I forgot to tell you, you were talking about practicing on the smaller stuff. Yes to that. And this was another tip from my interview guest, Jason Gore. He said, also practice at work and practice with friends and build up to doing the family stuff. Because the family
stuff seems to be the hardest.
Higher charge, higher stakes. You got years and years of history. So you can pick smaller things at work and with friends and then build up. And then once you got a few under your belt, you can say, all right, now I'm going to try a bigger one. Or you can be crazy like me and just go for the biggest one, and knowing everything else is going to be easier after that.
Yeah. It was interesting. I was trying to think of some tough conversation topics, and you mentioned a few, like, breaking up and getting fired and that kind of thing. But these days, especially, probably one of the, do you enter into these, these political discussions? Where basically if you are, say, dealing with a family member that has opposing, beliefs as you, and they are holding it against you. It's like, whatever people believe, is fine. But I have people, in my life that I know we don't have as good of a relationship anymore because of my, who I voted for, let's just say.
So you feel like they're holding that against you?
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Okay.
Yes,
So that's
absolutely.
that's a great example.
And I won't go into the, the story or who or anything like that. But
that may not even be a tough conversation. They may be just very simple, that they've got certain values and they don't want to hang out with someone who doesn't have those values.
Yeah.
So the conversation could be as simple as, I feel sad that we're not in communication. And if it's so important to you that all your friends hold your values, then I respect that. I'm not going to hold your values against you.
Yeah.
You cutting me out. I'm not going to hold that against you. And I just feel sad about it. And if that changes, let me know. We'll have a great dinner.
Gosh, that's an amazing, that is perfect. That is perfect. I'm gonna rewind this.
That's the letting go approach.
Yes.
I can just see, I'm finding them right. They're having their own opinions and values. And it's like, man, I wish I could believe in God and you believe in Satan and we could just be friends. But or I could believe in Satan, you can believe in God and we can be friends. But if that doesn't work, then okay, people got to. So what you can do is give them what you're wanting them to give you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And respect.
Be the stand. Be the change that you want to see in other people.
Yeah. You want them to accept your viewpoint. You can accept their viewpoint that they don't want to be friends with someone who voted for someone they don't agree with.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Or you might, if you go through the worksheet, you could go through the process. All right. My hope in having this conversation is that we'll feel closer. Yeah. My fear is that it's not going to work and we're not going to be friends. The issue is I feel like you're holding it against me, that I believe something different to you, and I feel hurt by that. And my request is, would you be willing to love me and enjoy me even though I believe something different?
It's beautiful.
Yeah, I haven't told you about the 4-step process, but it's basically that. You ask permission first, you share your hope, you share your fear, and these are all from the worksheet, right? So once you get the worksheet, you can use that as your talking points. And then here's my request. And then the last step is to, put yourself in their shoes. So the last step, you'll get curious and listen. Mm-hmm. Like, what's it like for me to come and bring this up? And what's your viewpoint? I want to hear anything you've got to say, and then you shut up.
Yeah, and that's therein it is the growth. I believe that's where the growth of these conversations really takes place. Because I believe that you mentioned earlier comfort, and we want to stay in our comfort zone and we want to stay stagnant, but there's no such thing as stagnant. There's nothing is stagnant, really. We can try to remain stagnant, but nothing, you're either growing or you're doing the opposite. You're going backward. And I believe that without having these tough conversations, we believe that we're staying stagnant, but we're actually in decay.
Yeah, that sounds right.
That's what I would say. So how can a person get started on this path of even knowing what kinds of conversations they ought to be having in order, like I imagine that the audience out there might be saying, well, I can't really think of a tough conversation that I need to have. Is there a baby step? Is there what are some ways a person can start to grow and enhance and use this philosophy to grow themselves in relationships?
I think that's a really smart question, because I started, I got all excited about teaching how to have tough conversations, and then I realized people aren't even aware of their tough conversations. Like, I don't really have any to have. Yeah, you do. The clue, a really big clue, is that you feel more distant from someone. So something happens, you're not loving it, you're not feeling close to them, maybe you don't want to go to their party. I just coached someone who didn't want to go home for Christmas. It's like, there's a clue.
Mm-hmm.
If you're complaining to someone else or gossiping to someone else about something someone did, there's a clue. It's like, oh, wait a minute. I don't like this. Why am I telling someone else instead of the person involved? Mm-hmm. So you can grab a pen, piece of paper, just a 5-minute exercise, really easy. On the left side, you write down anyone who comes to mind when you think, who don't I feel wonderful with? Write down, and then ask yourself, who do I resent? Who do I feel some guilt with? And you can just stick to the last 6 months, or if you want, you can just look at your whole life. Like, I bet there were kids at school that you weren't kind to. There were probably kids at school that weren't kind to you. You might have had a boss who, you felt was a real jerk. We talked about the small ones and then going up to bigger ones. I've gone back and spoken to people from 30 years ago.
Wow.
I spoke to a girl a woman now, but she was a girl who dumped me twice, gave me the cold shoulder twice. And that had a real impact on me. So I called her and had a tough conversation. 20 years later, I called a bully from school. I'd been just hating him. And I called him and had a tough conversation. So those are the big ones. But write down people on the list. It doesn't mean you have to go and talk to them. You just want to build some awareness. And then draw a line, and on the right-hand side of the page, write what the issue is.
Yeah.
I don't like that you said this to me. I felt offended when you did this. It bugs me that you do this. I think you shouldn't be voting Republican. Whatever it is, you write it down, and then you pick a couple that you go and cut your teeth on. And you can download the worksheet and the 4-step blueprint and do the work first, because it might seem way too scary. Do the worksheet. See what happens after that. If it still seems scary.
You take it on yourself and you do the worksheet yourself, and then the next step would be to actually nibble away at this conversation. Yeah.
And it changes. Like, you can go from, I don't know what I would say, I don't know how to have the conversation. Once you've done the worksheet and you're looking at the blueprint, it's like, oh, all right. Well, now I've got a roadmap. Now I can see what I'm scared of. I can see what my hope is, and that's a pretty good hope. And I've come up with a request. All right, I'm going to give this a shot.
Hello, this is Victoria Gallagher. I hope you're enjoying listening to the Power of Your Mind podcast. As a way of thanking you for listening, I'd like to offer you a one-time discount of 35% off your first order at hiptalk.com. Just go to hiptalk.com and enter the code PODCAST in the discount code area in your cart, and you'll receive 35% off your first order. Thank you so much for listening to the Power of Your Mind podcast. That is great. Now, so I hear people saying, why do I need to have these conversations? Why open up this can of worms? Why not just shove all this stuff up under the carpet where it's been all these years? Like, why do I need to do this?
Yeah. Well, I think a good reason to do it is because you pay either way. Mm-hmm. It's a tough conversation. It's already coming up for you because there's something that's not working for you. Mm-hmm. So you can either pay a small amount over time, which grows into a huge amount, and just be a bit uncomfortable and be more disconnected from the person and maybe have some regrets later on and miss out on the upside, which is the deeper connection, transforming the workplace, transforming your relationship, like you're missing out on all of that. Or you can pay up front. Yeah. Like the cold plunge, right? Or the cold shower. You can have it, be awkward, be vulnerable, and pay now. Mm-hmm. And usually for me, after I've had that conversation, it's not awkward anymore.
Yeah. Well, here's where I go with that. Here's how I answer that question for myself. I think of like our body and our emotions in terms of, say, a house. So you live in your house and you never dust, you never clean, and the house just builds up with dust, and eventually it's just complete dirty, unsanitary place to live, and the house will eventually start breaking down. And I believe that the same thing happens with these conversations. It's like a cleansing of your emotional, mental, spiritual self. And if you have these things just stuck in your psyche somewhere and you're not dealing with it, it's going to have an impact on you at some level, even if you're not aware of it. And so I was always afraid. I always just felt like not having these conversations, in my mind, it can ultimately lead to, stress and disease and all kinds of bad things.
Yeah. I just realized hearing you speak that it really takes faith. To have a tough conversation, it takes some faith and belief that the gain will be greater than the cost. And to go back to the exercise example, if you don't exercise at all, say for 5 years, you may not even remember or know how good it feels to have your body be fit and healthy. So it just becomes normal. And that's where I was with tough conversations and self-expression and communication. I just didn't have them. I was raised in Australia, in a country town. We didn't really face tough conversations. We just sweep it under the carpet. And so that became my normal. Now, after 20 years of practicing being fully expressed and leaning into the discomfort, I know what it feels like to have a fit and healthy body. Mm-hmm. I know what it feels like to have those conversations and to feel expressed and feel confident, to be transforming my relationships, and to have nothing that's looking over my shoulder or ready to bite me in the ass, to mix my metaphors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Clean it up.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. Fully. And I love the word fully expressed, because if you're not saying something, it's kind of like, you're walking by that thing in your house every day. It's this broken thing. It's like, oh, I need to fix that. I need to fix that. I need to fix that.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with
after a while, you don't see it and it becomes your normal. And visitors come over and they're like, how can this person live like that? And you don't even notice it anymore. So if you're listening to this and thinking, yeah, I've got a couple of tough conversations, but I'm not sure if I want to have them, it takes some faith. You may have just gotten used to how it is to not express yourself. Once you taste it and you have some good results, you may be hooked. And that's my job. I'm an evangelist for tough conversations, and I want people to convert and to realize how good it feels. And having said that, I need to give a caveat. Every now and then I've found a conversation that I'm not willing to have. Mm-hmm. If I don't see a profit in the conversation, like there's almost always the self-expression. There's always going to be that. But for example, I was in Bali and I was renting a villa, and then I sublet the guest villa to somebody else. And that's illegal. You can't do that because I'm making money and I don't have a work visa. Now, any other country in the world, they wouldn't care, but Bali, they care. And someone came to my door, flashed a badge and said, you need to appear for an interview tomorrow morning. I did some quick research and found out there could be jail time involved. Wow. And I realized that wasn't a conversation I wanted to have.
Yeah.
I didn't think the gain was going to be greater than the cost. So I left the country the same day. So I used to think, no, you should tell the truth all the time. You should have every tough conversation. And then I found, let's suppose you're not that close to the person. You're not really going to see them again very often. And they're not someone who generally wants feedback or seems quite open. I might go, I'm not going to invest in a deeper relationship with that person. Not worth it. There's
and
no profit.
this conversation is like, it's an investment. You are making a positive.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That's right. It's an investment. Yeah. There's a fable about a children's story about a grasshopper that just plays all the time in the sun and laughs at the ants that are toiling all the time. Then the winter comes and the grasshopper's shivering outside, starving, and the ants are warm inside with all their food. The grasshopper wasn't willing to invest. And tough conversations are like that. It's like you're doing the work, but you get these great rewards that keep expanding and evolving. I like that word.
Yeah, I do too. I do too. So what is your grand vision in all of this for helping, say, so you help inmates, you help corporations, you help individuals. I mean, where are you going? What's your ultimate journey in this process? What does the future look like?
I'm on a mission to transform cultures. So I was raised in an environment where we didn't speak up and we didn't share our feelings and we just kind of swept things under the carpet. Mm-hmm. And I found out how good it feels and how much more workable it is and practical to actually address things. Mm-hmm. So I would like to see the world shift. And one of the ways that I can have an impact on that is by transforming corporate cultures. So a lot of people are not talking to each other within companies. They're trying to preserve the relationships, not rock the boat, and it's horrendously expensive for companies and for the employees. So I've launched a new service called Tough Conversations Spot Coaching, where the whole company or a whole team can have access to just-in-time coaching when they have an issue and they're not sure how to deal with it.
Ooh.
I have an issue with my boss, coworker, direct report. I don't even know what the tough conversation looks like. They have a session with a coach as soon as the same day, and then we identify the conversation, role play it, and they go back out and they have the conversation.
I love that. Oh, wow. And so how is that in the works right now? Do you have?
The first pilot is happening in about 7 days. So we've got a company in Australia with 80 employees, and we're going to roll it out with them. And there's at least one other company in the US that's been doing this and has got some big name clients. So I think they've paved the way and shown that there's a huge need. Mm-hmm. There's also a company that has a warm line, which any staff member can call at any time about any issue, but it's not external. Mm-hmm. It's an internal service.
Okay.
One of the things that's great about this is it's external, fully confidential. You could talk about wanting to quit your company and it's not going to get back to your boss.
And they'll coach you. They'll spend 15 minutes with you.
30 minutes.
30 minutes, and you'll role play that conversation, and they'll go through your process. I love it. Oh, that is amazing.
And I have a slant. The way I like to do this is, instead of, let's say you've got an issue with your friend about the politics and you want help with that, I'll be you. And you be your friend. And we kind of did this a little bit in this interview. And I showed you how someone else might handle that conversation. You get to see it and experience it. And you can say to me everything you're worried your friend might say.
Right.
You can go to town. You can even yell at me and see how someone else might do it. It's incredibly transformative.
Well, and, here's the thing, too. When you go into a conversation expecting it to look a certain way or be a certain way, and this is just, part of my, my training, law of attraction, NLP, all of, hypnosis. You're basically guiding that conversation to be like your end vision. You have a vision of how you want that conversation to be. If you go into it with it's going to be horrible, and there's going to be all kinds of fighting and intensity and yelling and all of that. If you go into it expecting that, that's how it's going to be. But if you're role playing with somebody, you're also creating and rehearsing a positive, at least a positive way of having the conversation.
Yeah. Well, I imagine I have a story that when we did like our quick little role play and you heard me speaking, my story is that you heard me speaking with dignity and honesty and no attachment. Like you got to witness not just the words, but the how.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see, look, I really want to show you. There's a deer feet from my house.
Oh.
But he keeps sneaking around. Like I can only see this much outside the window, but the deer's like got his head right, almost looking in through the crack into the office. I don't think I can show you a deer cam right now.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah, it is gorgeous. So you can, when we do it, when I do a role play with someone, I'm almost always grounded because I've got clarity. I'm not you, so I don't have all that attachment. I've got some clarity, and it's almost always going to go well. If it doesn't go well, it still goes well. Like let's say you got angry and started yelling at me in the role play, I'd be like, well, it sounds like we can't have a conversation right now.
Oh, I like that.
There's still, it's still perfect. It's like, I'd like to talk to you. Or you know what? How about I just listen right now? It sounds like you got a lot to say.
Uh-huh.
Either way,
and you don't get triggered you don't get drawn into the
I don't.
Yes.
I might sometimes feel, I might be empathetic, and sometimes I'll like, oh my goodness, I was in prison, training in prison, I should clarify, with this guy who's a war vet. He's killed people in Afghanistan. And when I was doing a role play with him, I was being him and he was being his friend. I started crying. Mm-hmm. I just tapped into my empathy and felt love. And this big, strong man, ended up running to the bathroom. I assume because he was so moved, he didn't want people to see him cry.
Yeah.
He just ran out of the room because I was just feeling him. So sometimes I feel that, but I don't usually get triggered because it's not my thing, right?
And he's probably never experienced somebody empathizing with him that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So that back to getting someone's world. It's transformative when you can. You may not agree. All right, we're going to vote for different political parties and we won't be friends, but we can at least get each other's world.
Yeah. And I think there's growth on both ends. When you get somebody's world, you are growing as a person, but you're also giving them a transformation, because that's what we all crave, is that deep understanding.
Yeah.
Wow. This has been very enlightening and so informative, and I'm just really moved by what you're teaching and what you're sharing. And I totally believe that this needs to. I'm glad I had you on my podcast today, because I definitely believe this message really, really needs to get out there, and people need to start to do this. I mean, I've always really been into deep conversations and speaking at the highest level, and it's kind of an integrity thing in a way, because if you're holding back some kind of truth, in a way, I always felt that holding back something, you're trying to influence the outcome of something in a way that's not real.
You're distorting the system.
Yes, it's a distortion of how it's meant to be, and you're manipulating the outcome, really.
Agreed. And the brain is neurotic. We're not good at it. We don't have a billionth of the information we need to actually make the right decision. So I've decided most of the time it's better to speak my truth and let the universe respond how it needs to respond.
Yeah.
I find it's ultimately easier.
It's almost like, when you say the universe, it's like we're trying to play God when we don't speak our truth.
Yes. Yeah, as Byron Katie says, who needs God when we have your opinion?
Oh, that is great. That is great.
Yeah. Should we give people a link to the blueprint?
Absolutely. Yes. Let's please do. So, let's see. Do you want me to give that, or
I'll give it out. I love saying it. I
sure.
love
Yeah. Please, by all means.
Yeah. So the website is playforreal.life. It's not a .com. It's playforreal.life, and you can definitely get the blueprint. You can't miss it on the website. It's a free download. And also, I have a couple of invites. If something resonated for you in this call and you want to up-level life and work, I usually work best with both, then see if you qualify for a discovery session. Mm-hmm. And if you do, I don't charge for that because it's how I find the right people to work with long-term. And you can do that with the assessment you mentioned right at the beginning. Take the 5-minute assessment and then request a discovery session and we'll go over it together. And I'm the proud father of a baby podcast, Tough Conversations with David Wood. And I'd love you to join me there. You can listen to me as well as Victoria. Playforreal.life.
Awesome. Yeah. So go ahead and download that 4-step Tough Conversations blueprint. And you can go ahead and visit David on his podcast, playforreal.life. Did I say podcast? On your website?
Both website,
and then your podcast. Yeah. playforreal.life/tough conversations with David Wood podcast. So,
oh yeah, you don't need that. Just playforreal.life will take you right there and you can click on podcast.
You can just go right to the podcast. That sounds great. That sounds awesome. Well, thank you so much for enlightening the Power of Your Mind listeners today with these tough conversations and how to do it. And it looks like we're going to get a shot of a deer here. One wonderful way to end the... Oh my goodness! Oh, how beautiful! How beautiful! Wow, what a beautiful area you live in. You're in, are you in Colorado?
Yeah, I'm just outside of Boulder, Colorado. So this is Forest Cam. And we're just done deer cam. I could see the shadow and I'm like, I've got to see if I can get this on video.
Oh, what a treat. Oh, I'm so excited that I got to see that. Well, if you are listening to this episode and you didn't get to actually see this, I will be putting a copy of this episode on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Hip Talk. And you'll get to see the interview and also stay for the last little bonus, which is the deer that we got to see. It's beautiful.
Yeah, great to meet you, Victoria.
It was so nice to meet you. Thank you so much for being a guest on our show. And please, by all means, you guys, go and visit the website and get yourself that 4-step blueprint at playforreal.life. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with your friends. And once again, be sure to subscribe to the Power of Your Mind podcast if not already. We can be found as Hip Talk on all our social media accounts. So like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, subscribe on YouTube, and sign up for your free self-hypnosis video training course at hiptalk.com. Be sure to subscribe to the Power of Your Mind podcast, and you'll be instantly notified the moment the next podcast becomes available. Also, please be sure to leave a rating and a review to tell us how you're enjoying these episodes, and that way you're making a contribution toward others getting to share in this valuable information. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you soon. You've been listening to the Power of Your Mind podcast, brought to you by HipTalk.com, Personal Growth Club, and HypnoCloud apps available at iTunes.